Welcome to End of Life, a weekly podcast sharing the stories of those who survived the great zombie apocalypse. Through interviews with people from all walks of life, we uncover the early warnings, the exodus, the fight for survival, and the rebuilding of humanity. Today's episode, Perry Saint Abin's journey from street hustler, amateur porn photographer, to war correspondent during the zombie apocalypse, the unlikely king of post-apocalyptic family entertainment. In a world of bland rations and canned goods, Perry's empire evolved from underground adult content to food porn, elaborately staged photographs of sumptuous meals that no one can actually eat anymore. Join us as we delve into how Perry's business reminds us that even at the end of the world, human desires, whether for intimacy or for a good meal, never truly die. They just evolve.
Look, I ain't never been what you'd call a respectable businessman, you know? Name's Perry Saint Abin before all this zombie shit went down. I was just your average street hustler trying to make a buck in this crazy world. Now I'm some kind of, I don't know, food porn king or something. Life's funny like that, I guess. So there I was, right? Just another nobody on the streets running every little scam I could think of. 3-card Monty, fake Rolexes, even tried my hand at that psychic crap for a hot minute. Let me tell you, that last one, not my finest hour, but hey, a guy's got to eat, right? Now, I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed, but I got street smarts coming out of my ears, and let me tell you, that's worth way more than any fancy degree when you're trying to survive out there. So when this opportunity came knocking, I knew it was going to be my big break. It all started with this wedding gig. A friend of a friend needed someone to film their big day on the cheap, and I just happened to have this beat up old camcorder I'd acquired a while back. Don't ask, alright? Anyway, I figure how hard can it be? Point, shoot, collect the cash, easy peasy. Turns out I had a knack for it. Who knew, right? Before I know it, I'm getting calls left and right. Hey Perry, can you film my kid's birthday? Yo P, we need someone to shoot our band's music video. It was all small time stuff, but it was steady work, you know? Then one night, I'm at this dive bar, just minding my own business, when this couple starts chatting me up. They're pretty liquored up, if you catch my drift, and next thing I know, they're asking if I'd be willing to film them in a more private setting, if you know what I mean. Now, I ain't no prude, and the money they were offering was too good to pass up. So I says to myself, Perry, my boy, looks like you're in the porn business now. Word got around fast after that. Turns out there's a whole lot of people out there who want their sexy times captured on film, but don't want none of that big production fake ass studio stuff. They wanted real, they wanted cheap, and most importantly, they wanted discreet. And that, my friends, is where old Perry came in. I started calling myself a amateur and semi-pro adult content producer. Fancy words for a guy who basically filmed people banging, but hey, it sounded good. And let me tell you, business was booming. I even had to hire some kid to help me keep track of all the appointments and paperwork. Can you believe it? Or me with an assistant talk about moving up in the world. Now I know what you're thinking. Perry, you dirty old man. How could you get into that kind of business? But let me tell you something. It wasn't all that different from filming weddings or doing those cheesy real estate videos. Just people doing their thing and me capturing it on camera, no muss, no fuss, and the money was rolling in. Little did I know, though, that my little porn empire was about to come crumbling down. And I'm not talking about no police raid or angry husbands or nothing like that. Nah, I'm talking about something way crazier, something none of us saw coming. I'm talking about the freaking zombie apocalypse. I remember the day it all went to hell like it was yesterday. There I was, all set up to film this hot new starlet, at least that's what she called herself. More like a bored housewife with delusions of grandeur, if you ask me. But hey, her money was green, so who was I to judge? Anyway, I'm adjusting the lights, trying to make her look at least somewhat presentable, when all of a sudden we hear this ungodly scream coming from outside. Now, in my line of work, you hear all kinds of weird noises, but this was different. It was like, I don't know, like someone was dying and in pain, but also really, really pissed off. And before I can even process what's happening, this T-thing comes crashing through the window. I say thing because at first I couldn't even tell if it was human. It was all gray and rotted with these milky white eyes and teeth like a freaking shark. And the smell? Let's just say I've been in some rank places in my time, but this was a whole new level of nasty. The starlet starts screaming her head off, and I don't blame her one bit. This zombie, 'cause that's what it was, no doubt about it, starts lurching towards her, all grabby hands and snapping teeth. Now, I ain't no hero, but I couldn't just stand there and watch the poor girl get eaten, so I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my tripod and started swinging. Let me tell you something. Those things might look real scary, but they go down pretty easy if you hit them hard enough in the head. A couple good whacks with my trusty tripod, and that zombie was down for the count permanently. After that, it was pure chaos. More of those things started showing up all over the city. People were running, screaming, trying to get away. It was like every bad horror movie I'd ever seen, only this time it was real. Now, I ain't proud of this, but my first instinct was to grab my gear and run. Hey, a guy's got to look out for himself, right? But then I got to thinking. I had all this camera equipment and the whole world was going to shit. Maybe I could do something useful for once in my life, so instead of running, I started filming. I captured footage of the zombies, of people fighting back, of the military rolling in. Fat lot of good they did at first. I even managed to get some interviews with survivors, people who'd narrowly escaped becoming zombie chow. Before I knew it, I'd gone from being a small-time porn producer to a freaking war correspondent. My footage was being broadcast on what was left of the news channels, showing people what was really going on out there. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing something that mattered, you know. But let me tell you, it wasn't all glamour and excitement. Those first few months of the apocalypse, they were hell on earth. Food was scarce, clean water even scarcer. And everywhere you looked, there were those damn zombies just waiting to take a bite out of you. I lost count of how many close calls I had. There was this one time I was hiding out in an abandoned convenience store, trying to get some footage of a horde passing by. Next thing I know, one of them catches my scent or something, starts heading straight for me. I had to book it out of there so fast I left half my equipment behind. But hey, better to lose a camera than my brains, right? As the months dragged on, things started to change. People got organized, started fighting back for real. We learned how to take down the zombies more efficiently, how to fortify our settlements. And through it all, I kept filming, kept documenting everything I could. I gotta admit, there were times I thought about giving up. Times when the fear and the hunger and the constant danger just seemed like too much. But then I'd remember all the people out there who were counting on my footage, who needed to know what was really going on. And somehow that was enough to keep me going. Looking back now, it's hard to believe we actually made it through, but we did. Humanity survived against all odds. And me? Well, I went from being a nobody to having my work shown all over what was left of the world. Talk about a career change, huh? But little did I know, my biggest challenge and my weirdest gig yet was still to come. So there we were, right? The dust had finally settled. The zombie hordes were mostly under control, and what was left of humanity was trying to piece itself back together. That's when the bigwigs decided to set up these new regional government zones. Fancy name for whatever's left that ain't completely overrun by the undead. Yours truly got shipped off to Zone 3, District 2. Wasn't so bad, all things considered. We had walls, we had some semblance of order, and most importantly, we had a lot fewer zombies trying to eat our faces off. But let me tell you, it was a far cry from the world we used to know. Now, I figured my days of being behind the camera were pretty much over. I mean, who needs a pornographer in the post-apocalyptic world, right? Shows what I know. One day, I get this summons from the Ministry of Population. Sounds important, right? Turns out, these government types had a bit of a problem on their hands. See, between all the zombie killing and general chaos, our numbers had taken a pretty serious hit. And if we didn't start popping out more kids pronto, well, let's just say our long-term prospects weren't looking too hot. So there I am, sitting across from this stuffy bureaucrat type, and he's laying it all out for me. They want me to make videos. Not just any videos, mind you. They want me to make propaganda pieces encouraging people to, how did he put it? Engage in procreation for the good of humanity's future. In other words, they wanted me to convince people to start banging again. Now, I gotta admit, I had to stifle a laugh. Here I was, thinking my porn days were behind me, and now the government wants me to basically make state-sponsored smut. But hey, a job's a job, right? And if it meant I got better rations and didn't have to pull zombie disposal duty, who was I to argue? So I dusted off my old equipment and got to work. At first it was pretty standard stuff, good-looking couples giving each other bedroom eyes, lots of talk about doing your civic duty and ensuring the future of the human race. Real cheesy stuff if you ask me. But hey, the higher-ups seemed happy with it, so I kept at it. Then one day I had this idea. See, food was still pretty scarce, especially the good stuff, so I thought, why not combine the two things people want most, sex and a decent meal? I set up this scene with this smoking hot blonde laying in bed, holding a plate of these fancy little tea cakes. The guy comes in, throws the cakes aside, and well, you can guess the rest. Let me tell you, that video was a hit like you wouldn't believe. At first I thought it was just because of the girl. She was a real looker after all. But then I started getting all these comments and feedback, and you know what everyone was talking about? The damn tea cakes. Turns out people were more excited about seeing that food than they were about the nudity. Can you believe it? Here I am thinking I'm some kind of genius for combining sex and snacks, and it's the snacks that get everyone all hot and bothered. So I figured, why fight it? I started making more videos, but this time I focused on the food. Women posed with plates of pasta, guys flexed next to juicy steaks, couples fed each other grapes and chocolate. It was like food porn, but with actual porn thrown in for good measure. But here's the kicker. People kept complaining about the naked folks. Can you believe it? They wanted more food, less skin. It was like the whole world had gone topsy-turvy. So there I was, Perry Saint Abin, former street hustler turned pornographer turned war correspondent, now making what basically amounted to food porn for a post-apocalyptic government. Life's funny like that, ain't it? Now here's where things get real interesting. See, food was still a big problem, even with all the rebuilding we'd done. Fancy ingredients, fresh produce, that stuff was worth more than gold these days. So how was I supposed to keep making these videos showcasing all this mouth-watering grub? That's when I had my real stroke of genius. If people just wanted to look at the food, who said it had to be real? I started experimenting with props, a little wax here, some paint there, maybe some varnish to give it that juicy sheen. Before long, I had a whole workshop set up, cranking out the most delicious looking fake food you ever saw. Steaks that would make your mouth water, nothing but painted foam and a bit of glaze. Those perfect glistening fruits, wax and food coloring. Even the steam rising from a hot meal was just some clever tricks with dry ice and lighting. And let me tell you, people ate it up. Pun very much intended. My videos became the talk of the settlement. Every week I'd release a new one, 60 minutes of nothing but slow pans over tables laden with food, close-ups of steam rising from freshly baked bread, all set to some smooth jazz or whatever passed for music these days. The bigwigs at the Ministry of Population were thrilled. Sure, it wasn't exactly what they'd had in mind when they hired me, but birth rates were up, morale was improving, and hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Of course, keeping up the charade wasn't always easy. I had a few close calls where people wanted to visit the kitchen where we prepared all this amazing food. Had to come up with all sorts of excuses, health regulations, trade secrets, you name it. But somehow, I always managed to keep them at bay. There was this one time though when I thought the jig was finally up. One of the higher-ups from the ministry decided to pay a surprise visit during a shoot. There I was in the middle of filming this gorgeous roast chicken, really just papier-mâché and some clever painting when he walks this stuffed shirt with his entourage. I thought for sure I was busted. But you know what? The guy took one look at that fake bird and his mouth started watering. It went on and on about how he could practically smell it, how it reminded him of Sunday dinners before the world went to hell in a handbasket. That's when it really hit me. What I was doing wasn't just about food or sex or even propaganda. It was about giving people hope, a little reminder of the world we lost and maybe a glimpse of the one we could build again. As the months rolled by, my little operation kept growing. I hired a team of artists to help with the food props, got myself a bigger studio, even started branching out into different cuisines. Every week we'd showcase a different type of feast, Italian one week, Chinese the next, and maybe some good old-fashioned American barbecue. People couldn't get enough of it. They'd gather around whatever screens they could find just to watch an hour of fake food slowly rotating on a turntable. It was like some kind of mass hypnosis or something. But here's the thing, it was working. Not just in terms of keeping people distracted or boosting morale. No, I'm talking about actual measurable results. Birth rates were up, way up. Turns out there's nothing like the sight of a juicy fake steak to get people in the mood, if you catch my drift. The eggheads at the ministry were over the moon talking about population projections and demographic stability and a bunch of other stuff I didn't really understand. Crime was down too. Guess people were too busy watching my videos to go causing trouble. And get this, productivity was through the roof. People were working harder, putting in extra hours, all in the hopes of earning enough ration points to maybe, just maybe, get a taste of the kind of grub they saw in my videos. Of course, that was never going to happen, but hey, a little motivation never hurt nobody, right? I gotta admit, there were times I felt a little guilty about the whole thing. I mean, here I was basically lying to everyone with these fake feasts. But then I'd think about how much happier people seemed, how much more hope there was in their eyes. And well, I figured a little white lie was worth it if it kept humanity going. Now, you might be wondering, didn't anyone ever catch on? I mean, surely someone must have realized that all this fancy food couldn't possibly be real, what with resources being so scarce and all. And yeah, there were a few close calls. There was this one guy, real smart cookie, used to be some kind of food scientist or something before the world went to shit. He started asking questions, poking around, trying to figure out where we were getting all our ingredients from. For a hot minute there, I thought the whole house of cards was going to come tumbling down. But you know what saved my bacon? The higher ups. See, by this point, my little operation had become too big to fail. The government types knew that if the truth got out, it could cause panic, maybe even riots. So they did what governments do best, they covered it up. Next thing I know, Mr. Food Scientist gets a cushy new job overseeing some top secret agricultural project way out in the boonies. Problem solved. Just like that. As time went on, things just kept getting bigger and crazier. My food porn empire, because that's really what it had become at this point, was expanding faster than I could keep up with. We weren't just making videos anymore. Oh no, we had cookbooks full of impossible recipes and mouth-watering pictures. A weekly TV show where we'd cook elaborate meals that no one could actually make. Even a line of scented candles that supposedly smelled like all the foods people miss most. But you know how it goes, the more you give people, the more they want. Folks started demanding more variety, more exotic dishes, things that half of them had probably never even heard of before the apocalypse, let alone tasted. So there I was, scrambling to come up with new ideas, new fake foods to tantalize the masses. We did episodes on caviar and truffles, showcased wines that hadn't existed in years, even did a whole series on lost desserts of the world. It was exhausting, let me tell you. But at the same time, it was exhilarating. I mean, who'd have thought that me, Perry Saint Abin, former small-time hustler and B-grade pornographer, would end up being the guy responsible for keeping the dreams and hopes of an entire civilization alive. Of course, with great power comes great headaches, or however that saying goes. The pressure was intense. Every week we had to outdo ourselves, come up with something even more impressive, even more mouth-watering than before. And all the while, we had to keep the whole thing under wraps, make sure no one caught on to our little charade. There were nights I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, worrying about what would happen if people ever found out the truth. Would they string me up, throw me to the zombies, or worse, would they just lose that little spark of hope that had been keeping them going all this time? Now, I'd love to tell you that this story has a happy ending, that we kept on fooling everyone indefinitely, that our little food fantasy world just kept on spinning forever. But life ain't a fairy tale, especially not in a world where the dead don't stay dead. It all came crumbling down on what should have been our biggest night yet. We were planning this huge special, the greatest feast in human history. We were calling it. Had a whole smorgasbord of fake delicacies set up, each one more impossible than the last. Golden caviar, phoenix eggs, you name it. If it was rare, expensive, or just plain made up, we had it on that table. The whole settlement was buzzing with excitement. People had been saving up their ration points for weeks, hoping to win a chance to be in the studio audience for the big reveal. Even the government types were getting in on the action, planning to use the event as some kind of morale boosting celebration. Everything was set. Cameras were rolling, the audience was in place, and I was just about to pull the curtain on our magnum opus of make-believe meals. And that's when it all went to hell. See, what we didn't know was that all our success had attracted some unwanted attention. Turns out there was this group of survivors from outside the settlement who'd been watching our broadcasts. They were using wire coat hangers for TV antennas, and they weren't too happy about all the food they thought we were hoarding while they were out there starving. Just as I was about to start my big introduction, they burst in. Armed to the teeth and mad as hell, they demanded we hand over all our food. Now, for a second, everything froze. The audience, the camera crew, even the armed intruders, everyone just stared at this massive table of food, mouths hanging open in shock and awe. And then, in what has got to be the most surreal moment of my life, and remember I've seen the dead walk, one of the intruders reached out and grabbed what was supposed to be a perfectly roasted turkey. The look on his face when that turkey came apart in his hands like the painted styrofoam it was, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. What followed was chaos, pure, unadulterated mayhem. People screaming, crying, some of them even laughing hysterically. The intruders, realizing they'd been had, started tearing the place apart, as if they might find real food hidden away somewhere. And me? I did what any self-respecting hustler would do in that situation. I ran like hell. So here I am now, hiding out in some abandoned building on the outskirts of what used to be civilization, recording this little tale for posterity. Figured someone ought to know the truth, even if I ain't gonna be around to tell it in person. Last I heard, the settlement was in an uproar. The government was trying to do damage control, but you can't put that kind of genie back in the bottle. People were angry, feeling betrayed. Can't say I blame them, but you know what's funny? Even with all the chaos, even with everyone knowing it was all fake, them birth rates are still up, crime's still down, and I've heard whispers that people are actually innovating, trying to figure out how to grow and make the kind of food they saw in our videos. So maybe, in some twisted way, we did some good after all. Gave people something to strive for, even if it was all smoke and mirrors. As for me, well, I've still got my camera, still got my wits about me, and world gone mad, sometimes that's all you need to survive. Who knows? Maybe my next big break is just around the corner. But one thing's for sure, whatever I end up doing next, it ain't gonna involve food. I think I've had my fill of that particular racket. This is Perry Saint Abin, former porn king, accidental propagandist, and the man who fed the world's imagination, signing off. Remember, folks, in this crazy world, sometimes the only thing that's real is what you believe. So believe in something good, will you? And if you happen to stumble across any real food out there, do me a favor and don't film it, alright? Some things are better left to the imagination.
Thank you for listening to End of Life. We hope these survival stories resonated with you. Be sure to like, subscribe, and join us next week for more incredible tales of life after the apocalypse. Stay tuned and stay safe.